Okay, let's talk about the biggest slap on the wrist with a hot metal bar that any tech company has received in some time. I'm talking about the $1.5 billion that Anthropic had to shell out to settle its lawsuit against writers of books that Anthropic pretty much pirated off of the internet for its training data sets. Now, look, here's the truth about these tech companies that are coming up with these state of the art, incredibly powerful reasoning models. They are trained on some incredibly good quality data. And a big issue for a lot of these companies has been the lack of training data that's available on the internet anymore because they have consumed most of what's out there. It's a barren desertscape of new and available training data that's left for these newer and newer models to train on. And you're telling me that all of these AI companies didn't use pirated versions of books, published books in journals that authors have been trying to sell and get royalties from without acknowledging and paying the authors any money? I don't think Anthropic's been the only one. This is just my opinion. This is my speculation. I don't think Anthropic's the only company that's done this. But let's dive into Anthropic's lawsuit and how it got into trouble, why Anthropic's having to shell out so much money, and who's getting all of this money, right? So Anthropic used two sites to gather data. Gather is a very generous phrasing of what they did. To pirate data using sources like LibGen and Pilimi. Basically, Anthropic downloaded these books without the consent and approval of the authors and publishers off of these pirated platforms. Obviously, if you're pirating data, if you're pirating music or books, you're not really giving the authors of these books any kickbacks, right? Now, I'm not really going to comment on people that are pirating books to learn for college or whatever, who live in developing countries, right? That's not what this conversation is about. These are some of the richest tech companies in the world. Investors are throwing wads of cash at them. And they are training their AI models, the most valuable products they have in their repertoire, without paying authors whatever they're due, whatever they're owed. Well, Anthropic just set a precedent for what's going to happen to other tech companies that have been doing this. So Anthropic settled a piece of work that they pirated to the respective authors, right? Now, this does not absolve Anthropic of future acts of piracy or future use of copyrighted material without giving these authors any royalty. This is all for previous breaches of copyright. What this basically means is Anthropic also needs to clean up whatever they have in their data set, whatever training data they have in their data set that was collected from these pirated sources. Anthropic needs to scrub all of those training data sets clean until they are absolutely kosher. That's a tough job to do, obviously. I don't know how Anthropic's going to be handling that in the future, or at least Anthropic's going to have to come up with a model of how they compensate the authors of the works that they're training their models on, which honestly is such an easy thing to do, to be honest. Just give these authors, the authors of these books, these websites, these journal articles, whatever sum that they feel is fair in order for you to be using their work in your AI models. Let's be honest. If these AI models were trained on whatever was just publicly available on the internet, not behind a paywall, it would mostly be trained on absolute brain rot and racist stuff, right? These models would be so incredibly bigoted and racist and just spew ignorant mess, ignorant swaths of waste if these models weren't trained on books that people have done research, have dedicated their entire lives to getting expertise on whatever their subject matter is, and then authoring, right? So I think it's in the best interest of these tech companies to train their AI models on books, on journals. But it's also fair to everybody that these AI companies pay these authors and the publishers of this information. The other issue that a lot of tech companies and content creators are facing is, with the advent of these AI models, people just take a look at the AI summaries. People barely click into the links for the source pages that these AI models are summarizing. That's not great for content creators. The way content creators are incentivized to create content, whether it be blog posts, whether it be like a specialized video that summarizes how to do something, right? The way these content creators are incentivized to share their expertise is that they get a little bit of a kickback from the ad revenue that Google, YouTube, TikTok, whatever, these social media platforms generate. But if these AI models now give you a summary of all of that content without giving you a good reason to dive deeper into the source of all of this information, then that disincentivizes people to add more and more content. And that exacerbates the issue of there being a barren landscape for new training data for these AI models to work on. So what tech companies will need to do right now is, first of all, they should get their checkbooks ready, because I think the Anthropic lawsuit was just a watershed lawsuit. I think this is speculation, but a lot of other lawsuits are going to follow for all of these other big tech AI corporations. And especially for the proprietary models, these AI companies don't really disclose the sources of the training data, but let's be honest. If you're getting good quality responses, these AI models were trained on good quality training data, not the brain rot slop that you see on the rest of the public internet, right? So first of all, they should be getting their checkbooks ready, and then they need to be coming up with a model where if these AI systems use content from content creators for training, they will have to give a kickback for including this content onto the training data set, right? So yeah, there's going to be some rocky waters, right? Is that a phrase? Anyway, there's going to be some turbulence in the short term in terms of content creators figuring out, is it even worth it for them to keep creating content? But then eventually, I think the only way this sustains itself is if content creators, authors, publishers of journal articles, they get compensated for not just having their work included, but maybe even for having their work cited whenever AI models cite their works in a search result. That can be a minuscule amount, but that model needs to exist. Anyway, that's all my time. I need to drop for another meeting. Thank you all for